back to Plebs on Parade, the show where every pleb is a potential philosopher. I'm your host, Timmy Tether, and today we're talking to plebs about the strategic crypto reserve. Is it good? Is it bad? What do plebs think? Let's find out. It's Timmy Tether again here in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Before we meet our first pleb, I want to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, the Ungovernable Misfits. They are more than just an ungovernable podcast or a platform. They are a movement. The Misfits brand is for plebs who dare to imagine a world where autonomy, privacy, and self-sufficiency reign supreme. To learn more, visit ungovernablemisfits.com and look for their podcasts on Fountain FM. Now back to the show. We're talking to Bobby from Nashville. Bobby, what do you think about Trump's announcement regarding the strategic crypto reserve? Do you believe a sovereign nation should diversify its meme coin reserve or stick to wrapped Bitcoin only?
The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve of America is each household stacking Bitcoin. Not stacking Bitcoin for themselves, but for their children's children. Time horizons that extend upon the next 20 elections to extend the American dynasty another 250 years. The US dollar is slowly dying. Plebs, plumbers, doctors, AI models, lawyers, and Bitcoin insurance company entrepreneurs who are the backbone of this nation will make it great again through this act of selfless thermodynamic preservation of time. And the shitcoiners who do the dirty work wrapping our Bitcoin will be securing their bloodlines for another millennia as well.
All right, thank you, Bobby from Nashville. Bobby thinks the real strategic reserve is all the Bitcoin being saved by private citizens, secured by a diverse variety of hardware wallets until the federal government needs to issue an executive order 62102 to seize it in order to pay its taxes. Our next pleb is Seymour from Laramie, Wyoming. Seymour, what are your thoughts on the strategic crypto reserve? Good? Bad? Missing a privacy coin? Go.
Timmy Tether. The only complaint I have with this strategic reserve idea is they want to include XRP. If we are going to throw away taxpayer dollars and get nothing in return, we should just keep sending billions to Zelensky. Or better yet, just send it directly to his drug dealer. At least that's better than blowing it on a centralized shitcoin.
Thank you, Seymour from Wyoming. Seymour says we might as well keep funding Ukraine instead of buying XRP for the strategic reserve. Seymour, I'm not sure the suits in Washington even realize once they buy Ripple, the first 20 are America's forever, whether they want them or not, because they can't be sold. Look it up. All right, our last pleb is Terrence from Pasadena, California. Terrence, we're running out of time so quickly. What are your thoughts on the strategic reserve?
Timmy, all of this is David Bailey and Shinobi's fault. Ordinance magazine scammers have been poisoning the mind of the presidential administration, and it's only going to hurt the global south. Do they care? No. Shitcoin magazine makes me so mad.
Okay, that was Terrence from Pasadena. Terrence has David Bailey derangement syndrome and blames this all on, and I quote, Shitcoin magazine. It sounds like a personal beef, but folks, that doesn't mean he's wrong. That's all for this week, folks. I'm your host, Timmy Tether. Thanks for watching Plebs on Parade.
And now, a few words from Pastor Jeffs.
The Lord has called on you to be faithful. For those who trusted in Him during these dark times over the last week, when Bitcoin dropped below $80,000, your faith is about to be rewarded. Last night, the Lord gave me a vision of what is yet to come. In my sleep, He lifted me up, and before me was a sea of Solana meme coins. All those meme coins were pumping. Not only that, other altcoins with a lot of potential were also pumping. Then President Trump flew down in his Air Force One, spraying the meme coins with chemtrails to make them pump even more. The Lord showed me that everything in the world is a meme coin. If you believe the meme, you will have everlasting life. Our Father in heaven has ordained the God candle. While you don't know how many hairs are on your head, the Lord knew the exact moment of the pump before the universe even existed. He has tested your patience. He has separated the chaff from wheat. Before there was light and there was land, the Lord had a meme. And over a period of 7 days, He turned that meme into reality. In His own image, God created man. In His own image, man are also memers. Put your faith in the Lord, for He only pumps and never dumps. Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, we never lost faith in You. We knew that you would bring the God candle and deliver us from being unable to pay our taxes, just like you delivered the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. You gave them Moses to lead them out of the wilderness, and now you give us President Donald Trump. Give us strength to meme just like you meme. Help us to help teach others your good news. I pray these things in your name. Amen. Now, people, go out into the world with this good news and meme. The Lord has commanded you to meme. So stand tall and spread the good news. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Now, I have to hurry home from church to watch the end of the sports ball game I bet on. See you all next week.
Welcome back to the Bugle. We're recording this on March 2nd, Sunday afternoon. This morning, Trump responded to the North Korea story about the Bybit hack, and all the headlines of North Korea's dominating on-chain prowess and all the news about their Bitcoin reserve being grown even further. And he responds by posting about America's strategic Bitcoin reserve, which sparked a God candle. We haven't seen a God candle, I don't believe, in 2025 yet. Sparks a God candle, and it was so impressive that Peter Schiff actually has capitulated and admitted that Bitcoin is digital gold. The tweet also served as a function of giving clemency, a last-second stay of execution for the shitcoin Ethereum, which was set to be put down after a pathetic showing in East Denver. And all that and much more. It's been a huge week. Richard, how are you doing? Are you bullish? I mean, we just had a God candle, but I think right now Predator's bearish. Other people are bearish. Shinobi is bearish. Are people still in shock and disbelief?
Well, if Shinobi wasn't bearish, would it even be a Sunday?
That's true. You know who else is bearish? Sly Goomba. We can get into that, though.
Well, that one I'm a little bit concerned about. If Sly is bearish, Sly has a little bit more signal than some of the other people sometimes. Shinobi doesn't even have a podcast. I mean, how much can you trust a guy's information who doesn't have a podcast and actually considers Twitter Spaces a legitimate medium to communicate ideas about Bitcoin? But is it premature to call it a God candle? I know Samson Mao was out there tweeting about the God candle. The price has ripped a little bit. It's up, over 10,000 USDT?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. We've talked about this. It's beating a dead horse. But until we receive additional regulatory clarity about what constitutes a God candle, this is very similar to the situation we had, I think it was a year and a half ago. The economy officially had met the definition to be, which was 2 consecutive financial quarters of negative growth. But that was no longer the definition of a recession. And they did not provide regulatory clarity about that, but it was kind of just swept under the rug, memory hold, as you will. And that's where we're kind of sitting at now. Up until this point, a 10% daily candle was considered to qualify for being a God candle. So like I said, until further word comes out, I think we have to, as journalists, follow the guidelines and report this as being a God candle.
Well, I think the nice thing about being a journalist, like the reason why you go to journalist school and you get credentialed in the first place, is one of the privileges of being a journalist is you actually get to create definitions of words yourself. So one of the things that you're discussing is the media has changed the definition of recession kind of as to what's convenient to them and their corporate backers. And we have the opportunity to do that as well. And I would say this is not the God candle. And there's a few reasons why we can't settle for this being the God candle. One of the reasons is we can't let Trump think that we're satisfied by this, right?
Right.
We need to push him to pump it more. And also, we've been pricing Bitcoin differently than this cycle than before. You know, we're not talking about these like small achievements like 100K Bitcoin. We're talking about 2 trillion USDT a coin. We've already hit the 100K. Like that's an insignificant number now. We have to be thinking bigger. And so I would say like the real God candle is probably an amount like at least 1 million USDT increase in a day.
Yeah. Well, I do agree with you, and I think that it's important that kind of keep accelerating exponentially the amount that is considered a God candle. We should not settle, as taxpayers especially. Taxpayers should not settle for a 10% being a God candle in 2025. Mm-hmm. So, the way I feel about it is that the incentives here naturally are the solution themselves. Because Donald Trump woke up this morning and he's been dealing with a very stressful, very, new criticism and controversy past few days after the meltdown that Vladimir Zelensky disrespected Donald Trump and did not tell him good morning. He did not say thank you. He did not have an explanation for where his money has been going. And he did not accept the minerals deal. And he was very disrespectful. Just very disrespectful. And it was very, people were saying that Trump is, unable to control this little third world, dictator. But what he learned this morning is that he has the power with one tweet to create a God candle in Bitcoin. And that completely changes the trending topics on the algorithm on social media. And it totally creates a bullish reaction. So I think that Donald Trump has noticed that, of course. And I think that he is going to continue to push the boundaries and push for bigger God candles. Cause I think, when you post your first tweet that goes viral, you get like 10 likes, 2 or 3 retweets. When you've gotten 0 before that, that's a rush. And I think there's very few things that can give Donald Trump a rush anymore, like a Bitcoin God candle. He is, people are praising him right now. Not everybody though. Some people do not like it.
I'm definitely a little bit frustrated with Trump. So one of the things that you talked about was the meeting that so for anybody that had their head in the sand last week, which I kind of wish I did sometimes, but unfortunately my role in life is as a credentialed journalist, and so I don't have the luxury of putting my head in the sand like many people. But Trump, JD Vance, and Zelensky decided to have a podcast in the White House, live for the whole world to see. And JD Vance and Trump decided to disrespect Zelensky during the podcast and forget that he's a world leader fighting for freedom and democracy across the world. And it was just a sad day for our democracy, in my opinion. There was no decorum. There was no respect. There was no, they talked down to him, a fellow world leader.
They talked to each other the way that Terrence, Yang, and Shinobi talked to each other in Spaces. And if anybody has ever been in Spaces when Shinobi and Terrence Yang are debating, the impact of ordinals on the global South, that it's not a productive use of your time. It's not a productive conversation. All it does is cause people to dig their heels in and become more, just adversarial.
Yeah. It was a bad day. So I watched that. I was feeling a little bit discouraged. I was like, wow, this is where we're getting to. We're having these fiat argument podcasts that are where people are being mean to each other, like it's Twitter Spaces. The level of discourse is just dropping so low. It's unproductive to the tweet about the strategic reserve on True Social. Trump tweeted on True Social about his favorite cryptos going in the strategic reserve, the wrapped strategic reserve. And
can you tell our listeners who may not be paying attention the crypto reserve capital structure, if you will?
Well, I don't know how it's going to break down, but he did mention a series of coins. So he mentioned that the reserve would be including Cardano and Solana. No mention of Litecoin. He then did a correction later and mentioned that it would be including Bitcoin and Ethereum as well.
Yeah, and he did say that he loves Bitcoin and Ethereum, and it's worth mentioning, as we mentioned in the intro, this was a calculated maneuver. ETH was very close to basically being executed and being removed from the top 10 of the coin market cap top 10 list. And this is a big deal. I mean, Ethereum just anointed a new CEO who's a girl, and people are still digesting that. ETH Denver was completely, nobody sold any tickets. It was very poorly attended. It was the end. The ETH BTC, I mean, people were posting that chart on the hourly. It was so bad for Ethereum. And Trump woke it up because, we talked about this. We need shitcoiners, a certain subset of shitcoiners to wrap America's Bitcoin and to build those layer twos. And Ethereum right now is the one that the Trump family has chosen to go with, along with Solana, and with XRP and Cardano being sprinkled in there as well.
Yeah. There's some speculation that he'll be including Monero. And I don't know. We're gonna see what the breakdown is, but it is very clear that he believes in diversification. It seems like the Trump White House is kind of like the new Bitcoiner of the 2021 cycle. They come in, they see all the tweets, they get excited about NGU, and they get a Coinbase account, and they look at all these different currencies, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to put the majority into Bitcoin, but I'm also going to buy all the other ones to diversify, because you can't just have it all in one basket, right?
Yeah, well, I want to say that I think that this was more deliberate than even that. I think it's very obvious. We know now that Trump values the Solana blockchain, and the CIA values the Solana blockchain, because that is how they allow or how they're able to pump and dump meme coins. So they're pumping them. The CIA needs to be able to pump and dump meme coins in the global South, in Africa, help on board Tether, and the president needs to do that too. And the Supreme Court, they ruled that in Scamblers United that buying politicians' meme coins and pumping their bags is free speech. Just like Citizens United allows this for the legacy fiat system. And the reason they picked Ethereum is because that's, like I said, where they're wrapping America's Bitcoin. That is the favorite blockchain of, the Rothschilds. So they'd want to be able to wrap. That's where the president's Bitcoin is wrapped. And then XRP and Cardano, and that is very deliberate as well, because those two projects, those two communities are very, very good at getting bullish headlines. And he wants to be able to get bullish headlines. Donald Trump is very, very passionate about bullish headlines. And they both have a community of very, very loyal simps. And simps are very important on social media. So they have these loyal simps that are constantly supporting Donald Trump in the replies, even when Bitcoiners are feeling bearish or like Shinobi is tweeting that Donald Trump is retarded. It's good to have an army of simps to come in and clean up after that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that he's throwing an olive branch to the shitcoiners, because shitcoiners are good at NGU. They're good at marketing. They're good at NGU. Bitcoiners, not so much. And this is very apparent as seen in Nick Camp Mine's recent tweet about how buying XRP to put in the SBR is essentially like funding trans child surgery. You know, people will read that and they'll be like, wow, that doesn't make me want to buy Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Whereas the shitcoiners, they're doing all like, in order, I think Trump realizes in order to get the God candle, he needs Justin Sun. He needs that caliber of individual to get bought into what he's doing, to get bought into pumping him.
He needs an alliance in Asia to counterbalance North Korea, who is our only on-chain rival at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's. I think that there's a lot of people on Bitcoin Twitter who are very, very reactionary, but they don't have credentials, first of all, and they also need to lower their time preference and kind of have a better, more thermodynamically sound worldview that takes in a lot more points of view and understands that there has to be compromise. And I think that this is just part of a negotiation tactic. And, you know, it's working. So one of the reasons that it's to be so bullish today is that Donald Trump orange pilled Peter Schiff with his tweet when he included XRP in the tweet this morning. You know, Peter Schiff responded and he essentially, he capitulated. He said he understands what the rationale is for a Bitcoin reserve and that Bitcoin is digital gold and digital gold is better and more effective than analog. So you create a Bitcoin reserve. But he went on to ask, and you can look this tweet up. He said that, you know, what's the point of an XRP reserve? That just doesn't make sense to me. I get like, so I'm ready to accept the Bitcoin reserve. And that is, you know, boom, first step of the negotiation, the announcement. The second step of the negotiation is start to come to terms. And then Peter Schiff has come to terms with Bitcoin and the rationale behind it. So there's some of the people on Bitcoin Twitter is somebody who I pick on often, but it serves as a good example. He's an orange cell, and Twitter's been trying to orange pill Peter Schiff. Bitcoin Twitter has been trying to orange pill Peter Schiff for over a decade, honestly, at this point. And nobody's been able to do it. I mean, Pomp has debated Peter Schiff. Peter McCormick has debated Peter Schiff. We even brought in Greg Foss to debate Peter Schiff, and none of them could orange pill him. But Donald Trump orange pilled him today. And I know people are not ready to give Donald Trump credit for such a powerful orange pill roster.
So in my head, I'm thinking that David Bailey deserves credit for this because he essentially orange pilled. Well, he was the
100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
Yeah.
I would say that's the other thing. There's a lot of people who have there's two camps really. There's people with Donald Trump derangement syndrome, and there's people with David Bailey derangement syndrome. And the people with Trump derangement syndrome, they're never going to give Trump credit for these decisions. But the people with David Bailey derangement syndrome, they cannot stand to see that David Bailey's smarter than them. He's orange pilling more people than them. It's really orange pill jealousy.
So, yeah, what are the symptoms of David Bailey derangement syndrome? Like, what does that look like for? Yeah,
there's a few examples. Dieter Bob suffers from David Bailey derangement syndrome. So Terrence Yang famously suffered from that. Predator, the usual suspects. So what do? Anytime somebody who works for Bitcoin Magazine or has a past history of working with Bitcoin Magazine tweets anything, they reply to them and they blame them for ordinals ruining, spamming the blockchain, and 4, working for Bitcoin Magazine and sucking, as Dieter puts it, sucking David Bailey's dick. And that's the biggest symptom right there. It's anybody who is blaming the things that they are most critical about on Bitcoin Magazine and its employees, or really just project that they're mad at David, not the employee.
Interesting. Why do you think they directed at the employees instead of directly at David?
Because David doesn't control. David doesn't tell his employees what to write about and what to support. People like I said, the usual suspects, they understand that Bitcoin Magazine is one of the most influential publications, and that people get their opinions about Bitcoin from Bitcoin Magazine. Shinobi, never really was a pro-ordinals individual. He's never had that position, but every time he wrote something, he defended ordinals, or he didn't do enough to fight it. And so they blame him. They think it should be Shinobi and Mark Goodwin and some of those other guys. It should be their duty to basically to try to stop ordinals, and they didn't do it. They failed.
Interesting.
Like the, Monero, I don't know where you heard that Monero was going to get added, but I noticed there was a little bit of commisery and a little bit of celebration. It is very easy to tell that the Monero bros were acting very, very self-righteous, like they were glad that they were not involved in this strategic Bitcoin reserve fiasco. And there were people calling them out, saying that they were just jealous, that they weren't getting their bags pumped and they felt left out. And I just think that that's missing the point. I think anybody who knows a Monero bro, they don't care that the government is stealing their savings and stealing their property through currency debasement. They're okay with that. They want the privacy to not be able to afford their taxes and nobody know about it. And I think I think that's more respectful. Like the privacy, they don't care that the government's stealing from them. They just don't want the government to be able to violate their privacy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a smart, like they're individuals that want to be able to afford to pay their taxes. They just want to do it privately. You know what I mean?
And now, let's take a short break to hear some dating advice from Bugle correspondent Maggie Morris.
Hello and welcome back to Maggie's Relationship and Dating Advice Corner. Please send me your questions, and I promise to answer them at Crypto Epstein on X.
Hi, Margaret. I'm a 41 years old autistic Bitcoin whale. My hobbies are Sudoku and listening to old computer game music. I've had sex only once with a crazy lady. I'm looking for the perfect woman to share my life with, but I'm afraid she'll murder me for my Bitcoin. I'm also worried that hitting on women is like sexual harassment. Do you have any advice?
What you need on one hand is a woman that is so autistic she won't want to murder you for your money. Or on the other hand, a woman you like so much you'll want her to murder you. You just need to make sure you don't end up with a complete psychopath. To avoid that, you need to be the one that chooses them so they won't choose you. So here's my action plan for you, sir. Go to the university closest to where you live and offer them a generous donation on the condition they organize a small party or event for you where attendance from the physics and mathematics faculty and master's and PhD students is mandatory. At this party, you'll need to identify someone who you're interested in and try to hit on them with a math joke or something. Of course, you need to make sure that they know who you are, cause, I don't think this will take more than like $10 million or about 10 universities until you find the right person for you. Someone I think you'll be very happy with. It's gonna be totally worth it. About your woke mind poisoning, which makes you afraid to hit on women, I actually have a special course for that only costs 10 Bitcoin on discount, and it helps geeks who are afraid to hit on women after stuff they read on social media. And I think this will be a key to your success with women. Please send this podcast to your assistant so she can send me the money and I'll immediately send you the course. My address is BC1QQQ23DA0GMNU9RRV5FKXEZMENQDHWV0. Bye.
Right. And if inflation is going up so high and Monero is, it doesn't really have NGU, it's built out of it, really. I mean, you can't have volatility. Privacy and volatility do not really go hand in hand. So you have to have a stable, it's a losing value. Nobody's going to really look into it. And that makes it harder to afford your taxes. And if you can't afford your taxes, you don't necessarily want the whole world to know that. Why would you? So I get that, some people are not going to fail. They are going to put in whatever work it takes to afford taxes, and they don't care who knows it. And some people just aren't ready for that.
Yeah. Well, it's weeks like this. It's weeks like this for why the journalist wakes up in the morning. Like for years we've been dreaming of moments like this, where the world actually is changing. There's news stories. You don't just have to make up stories about nonsense to get clicks on your articles. Like, there's actual things that you can cover. There's debates to be happening. Things are changing. That it's not one segment of the deep state controlling everything. Everything's in flux. There's upward potential for your journalistic career because other media organizations are having issues and turmoil within, which you can seize upon. This is the moment that matters. And the Bitcoin podcaster is standing there in the arena, ready to take advantage of this moment. I'm curious how people are going to be able to compete with us and keep up with us if they're unwilling to smoke cigarettes like we are.
Yeah, it's that ability to lock in and to pierce through the veil of noise and find signal. It's not impossible to do without smoking cigarettes, but it's not the most efficient way to, do it if you don't smoke. So people are going to have to rethink, their biases and rethink their, programming that they've been conditioned to believe the smoking cigarettes is a negative. And I don't know, we talk about Trump derangement syndrome and David Bailey there's cigarette derangement syndrome as well.
Cigarette derangement syndrome is dumb. Well, speaking of a media organization that probably isn't smoking enough cigarettes, the fellows over at Blockspace had an oopsie and had to issue a retraction this week. They get all rah-rah about trying to dunk on Swan, and they totally... You ever see those videos where some guy is like wide open, run down the court with the ball, tries to do a 360 or windmill dunk, and just like totally rims it, and the ball goes shooting across the court, and it's just a completely wasted attempt? Or like when a football player is run across the goal line and they drop the ball before they actually drop across the goal line. That's kind of what I see is happening this week with this article. So Blockspace put out an article about Swan, suggesting that Ripple had given them investment money or was somehow involved. And then they issued a retraction. They said, this is a smart way to issue retraction. So I'll give Will Foxley a pass on this. It's very clever. It's a commonly used tactic by New York Times journalists where they issue a formal retraction. They say something along the lines of, our facts were incorrect, but our opinions weren't. But yeah, so how the story played out was they published this article, and then Corey got upset and started tweeting about it and said something about lawyers. And then they said that they were wrong and were working on a retraction. And apparently what happened was Ripple also sent Blockspace a letter saying that they were really upset that they would suggest that it was suggested that they would ever consider investing in Swan because Ripple values profitable companies with influencer CEOs that, like, instead of just tweeting all day about whatever nonsense and shitcoins, actually work on the company. What was your take on all this? This was a fiasco that was interesting to watch. Udi was involved, per usual. Anytime Swan is mentioned, Udi's around. Yeah,
this is a classic case of like audience capture a little bit, it is a very easy way to get, retweets, to get controversy stir and get trending, is to break some bad news about Swan or make fun of Swan in some way. And what happened was that Blockspace, they thought they had a really juicy story. And because they wanted to believe it was true, and they wanted to believe it was going to be the salacious story that they could dunk on Swan, because most of the bad news and rumors end up being true. So it was, kind of the odds were in their favor. So they ran this story, and none of the journalists that worked on it have bachelors in journalism. They're not credentialed. So they maybe cut some corners where they shouldn't, but they also shouldn't have believed that Ripple's entire business is creating very, very dubious, very loose business partnerships or agreements with other companies, with banks, and then they promote the shit out of that. And they say, hey, we just got this new partnership with this bank, or we're just going to run this trial with this new company. And it pumps gives the pre-miners, as liquidity. And it gives money for, funds the company entire existence. So they would not have a partnership with the other company in the space that is an automatic, like, viral fucking number one, YouTube channel for Bitcoin content. Like, it's going to be perfect to have a relationship or a partnership with Swan. They wouldn't keep that secret. Will Foxley is not going to be the one that discovers that partnership. It's going to be, PR Newswire. So, it's just, they were trying to feed their audience what they wanted to hear, and it bit them in the ass.
Yeah. There's been this growing rise of anti-Swanitism, and I don't know what to make of it. I think it's a lot of wasted energy. I tweeted about the subject. I said, Swanfluencers are kind of like Jews. Like, I think our audience is agreement. We want the Jews in our society. Like, when our audience isn't listening to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week, they might be watching like a good quality movie. And like, for like, say the Rocky franchise. So they're watching the old school Rocky. They're watching Rocky 4, where he's beating the shit out of the Russian guy in Moscow and practically ending the Cold War in a boxing match. And that would have never been possible without the Jews. And many of these Bitcoiners that are listening to Bitcoin podcasts, they wouldn't be where they're at in their journey without Swanfluencers. And, love them or hate them, the Swan guys have done okay on the content side. Like, the Brady Swenson Mafia is definitely a force to be reckoned with in the Bitcoin podcasting world. Like you mentioned, they've got the most views of a YouTube channel, which actually was surprising to me, because I don't ever watch them. I kind of forgot.
Yeah. It's just very hypocritical, in my opinion. Not everybody's hypocritical, but some people think that they say that they just don't want, or they're against, this fiat, marketing, astroturfing of, a company that they're influenced, like they talk about the influencers and all the podcasters of Swan pushing the Swan agenda for whatever Swan is trying to sell. And, they only hold Swan to that standard. They don't, call out all the other companies that run commercials. I mean, people sit around and watch the Super Bowl because they can't wait to see all the expensive commercials of these companies advertising their products. But when Swan does it, why do they single out Swan as the only company that's bad in terms of advertising? It just doesn't make sense. But, not everybody who is disillusioned with or not a fan of Swan content is necessarily anti-Swanitist. Some people are just too autistic to understand what advertising is. I mean, look at Predator. He was sharing screenshots of, people from the Fold organization, the marketing department, offering, premium service at Fold for free if he would post about from the fold going, the news about them going public. And, Plater went on this rant. He seems to think that people on podcasts have a segment at the beginning and end of every episode that they do where they talk exclusively about, a hardware wallet company because they like that wallet, that they just support that. He doesn't seem to understand that they pay for these commercials. So some people just kind of are in the crossfire there. They don't like any commercials and they don't understand what commercials are. But some people, they do understand that, but they only target Swan's ads and commercials.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't call myself a fan of Swan. You know what I mean? And this is one of the
not everybody, we don't simp for a company, but there are a lot of people who do. It's very important to them to simp their favorite KYC Bitcoin exchange. We don't do that, but that doesn't mean that we, that we hate or like any company. We're not fans of any company. We just use ones that, we don't use those companies. We just, we don't have to have strong opinions here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care for any of the KYC exchanges personally.
Right.
It's just not my thing. I don't use their products. I don't think it's necessary to interface with Bitcoin. Their employees don't smoke cigarettes. They all have super gay HR departments. Like, to me, it's all the same thing. The thing that separates Swan from like a River or a Strike is they have so many influencers in the podcast ecosystem. And, I get in a rough position frequently where I find myself having to defend them, and I don't really want to. I don't want to be a defender of Swan. There's no reason. Like, I don't use their product. I just don't care that much about them. I tolerate them. I put up with them. I think it's important for the larger ecosystem as a whole to just avoid getting stuck in these baseless anti-Swan-matic conspiracy theories. The anti-Swanitism needs to end, and I think it's okay to give them fair criticism where it's due, but to get over the top with the anti-Swanitism stuff is just, it doesn't drive your point across at all. It just makes you look dumb.
But I don't think the Swan influencers are cool or like the Swan Force. Like, I'm not saluting a Swan Force member when they walk by. Like, that's like, I'm not gonna simp like that. And I don't use those KYC Bitcoin companies either, like you said. But I will say this: I appreciate what those companies do because they support Bitcoin podcasts. If it wasn't for companies like Swan and River and Strike, these other ones, a lot of people wouldn't have ever gotten into Bitcoin podcasting. We wouldn't have all these Bitcoin podcasts to listen to. So I think before you throw the baby out with the bathwater, think about, what they're doing for the Bitcoin podcast system. PodConf is, we don't want to abolish PodConf completely without recognizing the cool conferences and podcasts that come with them. We just need to realign their incentives and get it off with a fiat standard.
I'm fine with abolishing PodConf completely.
Well, I just think it's very, it's very short-sighted. It will cause too much chaos.
I'm fine with the chaos personally, but yeah, it's just weird to watch, like, kind of the comings and goings, the rising and falling of these influencers like Corey, these CEO influencers. And I think it's just kind of a natural cycle, and it doesn't need to be influenced or fed or accelerated by baseless conspiracy theories, is essentially my standpoint.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree there. It's just, it's a conversation that, that needs to be had. it's bad for your reputation, I think, for your to be, an anti-swan. It can really hurt. It can hurt your career, and it can hurt your podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot of people are getting themselves in the hot water where they might not want the Swan sponsorship money today, and probably part of the reasons why is because Swan doesn't have any money to give for sponsorships. But when the bull run is pumping, and Swan has a bunch of money and they're hiring all these influencers again, they're not all your friends, you might find yourself in a situation where all your friends are Swan employees and you're kind of a person non grata because like all your buddies are going to the Swan sex parties and you're not.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get to be there for the stuff that happens, after the conference shuts the lights. But you also bring up a good point. Remember the people who, it wasn't until Swan didn't have any money, it wasn't until Swan was broke and couldn't sponsor their podcast or give them free tickets to a conference, that they were brave enough to speak up about Swan. And, when it was a good chance that they might get that paycheck, they didn't have anything to say. But as soon as that went away, they were like, oh, I've always been a critic of Swan. It's easy to remember that. And just remember who stops being brave enough to call out Swan if they get more money. It's just a way to evaluate the incentives of the influencers that you're following, because sometimes people they're trying to build an audience off of being anti some, meme or company or meme game that you don't like. And that doesn't mean that that's wrong. But you just got to think about, are they brave enough to do it when it's not profitable to do it?
Mm-hmm. When it's not trendy, when it's not cool. Like that's one of the things, a lot of these critics that don't have credentials, that don't really have skin in the game, they sit on the sidelines in their rocking chairs, twisting their mustaches, lobbing, insults from the peanut gallery. They're not the men in the arena.
Right. Exactly.
They're waiting for the next. There's this problem. There's this consistent problem on Twitter all over the place, which is the bandwagoners. Last cycle, Yellow coined the term replicators. They're just the replicators. Like there's this anti-Swanitism segment of the population that just want to replicate goofy things. And we'll see. I mean, I think we should take notes. We should take notes on who's lobbing anti-Semitic insults at Corey, at whoever, and then watch and see if they change their tune when Swan has money again and when it's cool to be a Swanfluencer again. Because if it means that they get a speaking slot to whatever the next version of Pacific Bitcoin is, if that's the case, then they might be pro Swan again, but we'll have the receipts. We'll be like Predator on this one. But yeah, enough on that topic. I get so tired of defending Swan, of defending Corey. I feel like somebody needs to do it. I'm just trying to be unlike Will Foxley, I'm trying to be intellectually honest here. And
people are creating a monster. I mean, look at what the mainstream media and people did. They accused Trump of like all these things that it was, either hypocritical or it was just they were crying wolf, and people are constantly saying that Swan's downfall is coming soon. Yep. And, they're crying shit wolf, you know what I mean? And they're creating a monster. They're creating a Teflon Swan, like a Teflon Don, a Teflon Swan that, someday somebody's going to have a very, credible piece of information to warn people about Swan, and nobody's going to take it seriously because everybody was using it to engagement farm.
Yeah. Like the point of this podcast is to not promote companies like Swan. It's to ensure our listeners know that there's another route, that you'll never have to use Swan if you don't want to.
Right. And listen, we know that you hate hearing about Swan. We know that we hate talking about Swan. But you know, all this just nonsense and this fake drama, the conversation about Swan will continue until people's, you know, behavior improves and they just stop with the drama just to get engagement. Before we get into the boost though, I wanted to, glad, you know, we're looking at Fountain because I called out, made a tweet that Fountain did not even like. They didn't retweet. They didn't acknowledge whatsoever. But few you did. It's cool. You know, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Fountain needs to think more about and value more the podcast listener. They do a good job of providing tools for podcasters, but they just, you know, as a podcast listener, but a better user experience is desired. And I think a slam dunk easy one would be tracking hours listened to. And I think that people, if they had the opportunity to display proudly their prestige badges, their badges of honor of listening to 40 hours per week, and doing that consistently, and being like a 1.75 speed hero with somebody who gets through so many hours. And not only would that just be a great way for Bitcoin podcast listeners to express themselves, it's a valid, you know, Jason Lowry's in the news this week, and he wrote a masterpiece, the Fyodor Dostoevsky of thermodynamically sound, theses, is his software and using reusable proof of work to provide cybersecurity and national security. And these proof of works are so important. And anybody who's ever listened to podcasts on Fountain knows how battery intensive that is, that your phone gets hot, your battery dies, because Bitcoin podcasts are just so much more intense and you have them up at full volume. And so probably why Sly Goomba always blows his headphones is listen to it on Fountain. And that is a proof of work. If you are putting in 40 hours per week, that is a lot of energy drained from your battery that you have to charge your phone. And I can, you know, somebody tells me that they listen to 40 hours per week because they want to work for me at my company, or we want to do a partnership. They want to do a value for value relationship with somebody they met on the intellectual Silk Road. If I can look at their profile and see that they have listened to 40 hours per week for the last 200 weeks straight, like that is inherent objective proof of work that can't be fake.
Yeah, I feel like this would be helpful in the hiring process. So you theoretically get a candidate that you want to work with you. You don't want to hire individuals that listen to any less than 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. And this could be like a badge that you could put on your LinkedIn profile. You put on your Twitter account, on your roster.
Anywhere that you can, you know, sign an NPUB with your NSEC and show your potential employer, your potential, you know, business partner, a decentralized proof of work of your 40 hours per week.
Mm-hmm.
You could make that part of, like, you could only open a Lightning channel with another person who listens to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcast per week, because you know that person knows how to balance their channel and is not going to just go offline.
Yep. You're pitching, so you're trying to fundraise from like Mike Jarmez or somebody like that, maybe like a Stephen Cole or a 1031. So you're fundraising for your whatever your Lightning startup is, and they want to see a little bit of a resume. Boom. You whip out your credentials, 40 HPW. Makes a ton of sense to me. I don't know why I found him.
Absolutely. And, you know, even for nothing else, it's bragging rights. It's, hey, let's all find, you know, let's all look at Boomer. He listens to more Bitcoin podcasts than anybody else.
Yeah. Another thing that I want to shill before going into the Fountain Boost is Orange Label t-shirts. So what we're trying to do with our merchandise is we're trying to do a few things, right? This is a form of value in a way. So we create something valuable to you. So like when we ask you to boost our show on Fountain, it's helpful for a few reasons. It's helpful because it helps a trend. The more boosts we get, the higher up we are on the leaderboards. It gets more visible to other people. So it's useful for that. It's the same exact thing when you're buying our merch. So you're like boosting us in real life. So you buy a 40 HPW t-shirt or Comply t-shirt, you're rocking at the meetup, somebody asks you where you got your t-shirt from, and then all of a sudden you're telling them about the Bugle. There's a little bit of a financial boost that goes with it, but if that's the trade-off you like, of like, okay, you get a t-shirt as a response instead of, you know, us commenting on your comment on Fountain, that's cool. But yeah, it's a way to boost us in real life, to propagate the meme. So this 40 HPW shirt, I got my hands on one. I think Mars got one too, or secret financier, the one who's really controlling things behind the scenes. He got his 40 HPW Intellectual Silk Road shirt. What a cool shirt to wear around. You show up to the meetups, you're propagating the memes, listening to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. Like that's your Fountain badge in real life. If you show up to a meetup in that shirt.
Yeah, it boils down to this. When 40 hours per week is a statement, people see you wearing a 40 hours per week t-shirt, they immediately know that you don't waste time, and you don't have time to waste. And you immediately, that communicates so much about who you are and what your vibe is. And like, don't come to me with some bullshit, you know, XRP talk. Don't come to me with some bullshit about some drama about anti-Swanitism. But don't come to me unless you're ready to have a value for value relationship. Because I don't have time to waste, and I don't waste time. I'm a 40-hour per week guy.
Yeah. Like I know meetup organizers for years now have been trying to figure out creative ways to deter shitcoiners from invading the meetup and swaying the discussion towards topics they find kind of uninteresting or unhelpful. Like, you know, say some guy comes into your meetup and only wants to talk about his MicroStrategy and software. Like, how do you deter that from happening? Well, person walks in, they're looking for the group of people wearing Bitcoin merch, or, you know, however you identify your meetup group. And the first thing the shitcoiner sees is 40 HPW. They're like, fuck, I'm not going to be able to explain my shitcoin scheme to these guys because they already know it's stupid because they listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week.
Before we go into the Fountain Boosts for the week, let's hear Maggie's last bit of dating advice.
Hey Maggie, I have a micro penis which makes pleasing my wife difficult. Fortunately, I grew up in a Christian household and waited to have sex until marriage. Unfortunately, my wife is incredibly dissatisfied with me. There's really nothing I can do about my penis size, but I'm wondering if going to Robert Breedlove's Alpha course would help our marriage.
Oh, come on. I thought with the new HR department, I wasn't gonna get this kind of question anymore. Well, does Robert Breedlove teach how to get? If so, go for it.
But yeah. Anyways, let's get into the Fountain Boost for the week. You can check out the 40 HPW clothing line, the Comply clothing line, and much more on orangelabel.co. Or wait. Yeah, that's the website. orangelabel.co. Exactly how it sounds. First boost from Miss Hodleknot. 20,000 sats says, I went to rehab for laxative addiction. I'm back now and ready to get back to full-time podcast listening. Well, welcome back, Miss Hodleknot. We were wondering where you were.
Yeah. Well, you know, Miss Hodleknot likes to post all kinds of stuff to to get attention. I think one of the best things about having that 40-hour per week badge is to, I think we all find out how little like Bitcoin podcast she actually listens to. I don't think the proof would be there. The proof of work.
So what do you think laxative addiction looks like?
It sounds like shit.
Do you think it's like the people enjoy taking shit so much that they just like...
Hey, taking a shit is it's a good place to listen to Bitcoin podcasts. I think maybe people have like a Pavlovian response to, they start to think that they're getting a dopamine rush from taking a shit, but it's really just they're listening to Bitcoin podcasts, or listening to James Lavish and Preston Pish talk about, what Bitcoin's bullish charts are looking like for the next financial quarter. But yeah, it probably looks something like that. But,
it's probably a pretty tough addiction because, what I kind of imagine it looking like is your body gets hooked on the laxatives so that you can't shit unless you take them, right? So, but why would you even stop taking them if your body gets hooked on it? Like, you need to shit, right? So I wonder, like, what the negative, like, because people typically go to rehab once there's some sort of negative repercussion for their actions.
I don't know that. I don't want to speculate. We do gotta get through these fountain base though. So Ms. Holnott, I hope you are back on a regular schedule and are able to listen to Bitcoin podcasts again. The next one is 10,000 sats. From a late stage huddle. It says, read my boost from last week, or I'm reporting you for non-compliance. Please. So I went back and I found his boost from last week. I think he came in late. Yeah. From this point forward, if you don't get your boost in, by the time we've already read them on the episode, it's too late. You don't get to be on there. But he goes, this was for 15,000 sats. So maybe if it's 15,000 sats, we will go back and read a comment for you. But a few episodes ago, someone said the Bitcoin podcast power law was the evolution of the Bitcoin power law, but I think it's more of a derivative. CC, fundamentals, since I'm just a simple pleb. When I met fundamentals in person, I realized his voice was mostly just numbers and math equations being converted into dialogue and dumbed down so my brain could comprehend. He may be able to help with this discussion here, but I know I am way out of my depth, and I will just continue with my 40 hours per week to get a leg up on those only listening to 40 hours. Praise Satoshi and his compliance to never sell and therefore never owe any taxes that he knew he could have never afford. That was a really good shout out to fundamentals there. It sounds like late stage model does not think that, he thinks that it's a derivative. He watched The Big Short and he listened to Margot Robbie in the hot tub. She talked about financial derivatives. And he suspects that the Bitcoin podcast power law may be derivative of Bitcoin power law. So fundamentals, if you are listening to this, get started on the math equation that proves this, the proof of 40 hours of math and work. And maybe you should do a clipboard, a discussion about this on your math podcast, your math on work podcast. And maybe we'll play a clip right here to let our listeners know, but you should go and check out Fundamentals Math Podcast because he is a very smart mathematical mind.
So you just read Late Stage Hodl's boost on the last show, on this show? Is that what happened?
Yeah, his boost, the second boost was him requesting that we read last week's boost.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're going to send a really good drawn-out boost, you should probably do it in a way that we actually see it, because I completely missed that. But that's interesting. Well, thanks for both of those boosts, Late Stage Hodl. Appreciate it. Next one is from Anonymous, 5,000 sats, says smoke crack, give back. Wrong, smoke cigarettes and give back. It's my opinion. I don't know about crack. Go.
The next boost is from, when I will aggregate these, It's 40 hours per week from Pies. Thank you, Pies, for 420 sats. And then Pies also boosted the episode 3 more times over the course of a few different days. So he's coming back, maybe listen to it again. Pies listens to so much sometimes, I guess he has to listen to them more than once before he has more podcasts. But he says, for 100 sats, all 3 of these. So I think we should base the sats cigarette pricing based on prison tobacco prices. I miss pricing ramen noodles and cigarettes from my days in prison. Yeah, I mean, hey, work with fundamentals, get us a podcast or give us a math equation for this, and we will get that entered. Potentially, we could have a petition to get that entered into the CPI. And then Pies also says, I wonder if I would get more street cred on Noster posting a pic of me shirtless jackhammering. Yeah, I think that definitely could not hurt Pies. Also, based on, some other really great, if anybody's listening, go find Pies' other podcast boosts, especially those on Ungovernable Misfits. He tells really good stories about his days leading up to his time in prison. So based on those, that context, I would say don't post a picture of yourself on Noster shirtless jackhammering unless that is on the work site, on a OSHA compliant work site, OSHA compliant jackhammer. Do not post any of the cocaine strip of porn. But, Noster is censorship. Nobody can tell you what not to do. That would just be my recommendation.
Well, thank you for all those boost, Pies. Yeah, interesting story. I learned about the story a little bit this week of why Pies went to prison. It's not as bad as some people think. It's just general non-compliance, good non-compliant behavior.
Yeah. Finally, I mean, listen, I think it's badass, but, not everybody thinks that the lifestyle for them is, living above a strip club, being the coke dealer guy, and doing threesomes with strippers, every other day. That is a very badass, non-compliant lifestyle. But again, not everybody has the time preference to be able to handle that type of lifestyle. And maybe, who knows, maybe Pies wasn't either. He was having a good time, but it took, he had to go to prison, lower his time preference, and start to thinking of more thermodynamic, start to think about money. I mean, Pies started to think about money when it was scarce in terms of cigarettes and ramen noodles. Laid the foundation for him to the orange pill.
Yeah. Some people call it a prison-worthy offense. Other people just call it an evening hanging out with Kaylee Welch.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for the boost, Pie. Next boost from Odie. HPW 365 sats. KP strong arm. What do you think that stands for?
If you look in looking in the mobile app, that is a North Korean flag. So he's doing the flex for North Korea, being the Bitcoin standard.
Well, it's good to see some Bitcoiners finally giving North Korea the creds that they deserve. Here, let me look at the mobile app.
The next one is it's from God's Death, 237 sats, and God's Death. I think we shared good mornings on Noster each morning, 40 good mornings per week. If you're familiar with that, that's the Blood Chain Radio, Quiet Warrior. We're going to talk about that a little bit more next week because I owe Avi Burra from Blood Chain Radio a roast. So that'll be coming. And learn more about 40 good mornings per week. But thank you, gentlemen, is what God's Death says. Thank you, God's Death. And good morning to you.
So just before we get into the next one, looks like Odie's a Bitcoin musician, producer from Norway. That's pretty cool. And then God's Death is not just a dirty mechanic, so more than just a dirty mechanic. That's what their Noster profiles say. And then the last boost that I see, maybe there's one that slipped through the cracks that you see that I don't, but 200 sats from BTC on board once again. Lightning, fire. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Well, that looks
what's up?
Oh, I was just gonna say that wraps up the boost for today. I was curious if you had any closing thoughts.
Oh yeah, no, it was a big week, big developments. We're still in the middle of the Rising God candle today, so it's an exciting time right now. Stay tuned. Like we said, the bull market is our digital orange-pilled rodeo. And a lot of people got bucks, especially people who are shorting, IBIT and the ETFs right now. We're just waiting on the sidelines. So don't let the bull buck you. Stay tuned.
Storms rolling in and darkness on the horizon. You work so hard, but fate's not compromising. Clock strikes 12, there's no time to waste. Trying so hard, but life's spitting in your face. Nights without sleep, you can rest when you're dead. Don't be friends with sheep, you have to use your head. Living in a circus is not good for the soul, but being driven by purpose will teach you what you need to know. I know it feels like it's all falling apart. There's no ignoring that aching in your heart. But you can't be found until you're lost. To really live, this is just the cost. There was a time before when things seemed certain. You wanted more, but you saw behind the curtain. Your dreams were endless, striving to live for something. The people on the TV told you that you were nothing. The people praised for morals were really rabid dogs. Your innocence stolen by savages who thought they were gods. Pride and money and dropping bombs, stealing your future. The population around you stuck in a stupor. I know it feels like it's all falling apart. There's no ignoring